So, which herbs do you most often see nutritionists using time and again for their endo clients?
Good question. One of the ones that I see quite a lot actually is rhodiola.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of buzz about it at the minute. Rhodiola, it's an adaptogen herb and it's great for a lot of things and it's great for a lot of people. However, with endo, it's not always something I would jump to. Energetically, it's a very hot herb, okay? So it's very warming. And it's also extremely drying. So if you have a client that already is quite hot and inflamed and has any issues with dryness, it will exacerbate it. So exactly. So it's not one that I would jump to. It's also an extremely, so with adaptogens, you've got different types of adaptogens. You've got stimulating and relaxing adaptogens. And unfortunately, rhodiola would be more of the stimulating kind. So again, if you've got an endo client that's already quite frazzled, you're only going to burn them out even more.
Mm.
A herb like rhodiola, and I suppose to the same extent ginger would be another one on the same kind of idea. It's very warming, so yes,
Mm.
you can use it, but it's all about the dose, and you don't want to overheat somebody that's already hot. So those
So,
are the two. Yeah.
I'd be amazed if there aren't people watching thinking, holy shit, I've put several of my endo clients on rhodiola and I ask everyone to drink ginger tea, for example. So that in itself is super vital and kind of illustrates this whole conversation of like, we're not taught any of this shit at uni and off we go giving people stuff.
Yeah.
So presumably you would encourage nutritionists to make use of herbs in their practice. But based on what we've just said, what's the stuff that we don't know that we really need to be aware of if we're going to use them?
So again, like we do with nutrition, with herbs, you want to treat the person in front of you. Okay, so it's very much a bespoke kind of plan. So just because you have ginger, that's like a really good anti-inflammatory, doesn't mean that you necessarily want to jump to it for every single person. So you really want to get to know the client. And get to know the plants as well, and which ones work for which types of people. Because really, without that, if you're just going to start picking plants based on a few things that you know that they do, that's where you can run into some trouble. But yes, herbs are fantastic. You can use them for so many things and you can achieve so much with the plants. But it really is just getting to know the client and the plants themselves and matching them up.
So we had a chat the other day when we were trying to think of an acronym
Yeah.
for the way how like we always, well, I always anyway, have always thought of like chatting about the way the other day how often I used to think, because I didn't know any better, and probably other nutritionists also think, that you pick a herb to do a thing. So like, that's the liver herb, or that's the PCOS herb, but we were trying to think of an acronym, how like it's not just a fish that does one thing, it's more like an octopus that has all these numerous different things. Can you explain a little bit about, I don't know, why that might be really important to grasp if before we just throw a bit of something Vitex in the mix, for example?
Okay, so yeah, so like there's, people are quite, I mean, I suppose it's human nature. We just tend to like pigeonhole certain herbs to certain things. So we have like feverfew, which is like the migraine herb. So if I use that as an example, so quite often people will use feverfew for migraines. However, from a herbal perspective, we look at the different types of migraines and energetically again, sort of, you know, feverfew is good for particular types of migraines, but not all migraines. And also, feverfew does a lot more than just help with migraines. So if you're only going to use that herb for migraines, you're missing out on potential other uses of it as well for your clients. So feverfew probably isn't one that a lot of people working with endo would use anyway, but that's just kind of an example. Another example would maybe be the likes of chamomile. So, people would use chamomile, for help with sleep, but actually, chamomile is fantastic for a whole host of reasons. So it's very cooling and it's very soothing, particularly to the digestive tract. So if you have any kind of inflammation going on in the digestive tract, chamomile is brilliant for that. It's also anti-allergenic, so great if you've got anybody with allergies and histamine kind of issues as well. It's quite supportive for that. It's great for skin. It's great. It also works in the liver. It's also a digestive bitter. So if you've somebody with digestive issues, bit of bloating, chamomile is great for that. It's a carminative, so it basically mops up endotoxins in the bowel. So if you're working with somebody, like herbal antibiotics or whatever like that, to help with the bowel, adding something like chamomile that has that carminative quality is great.
Which is a pretty big deal
Yeah.
for helping endo clients, because
Yeah.
endotoxins, we know, are such a big deal. So we may be skipping over some of these options, thinking,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's not really going to do too much,"
Yeah.
and kind of missing a cheap and a really effective thing, which
Yeah.
would be a real shame.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
if you had one, I always ask the practitioners, if you have one golden nugget, like what would be the biggest value bit of info you could give to everybody who's watching, who does or wants to use herbs as a nutritional therapist?
So the best bit of advice I would give is to learn, pick 10 plants and learn them well and know when you're going to use them for those particular clients. Really get to know the plants. Don't just say, oh, camomile's for sleep and ginger's for inflammation, etc., etc. Really get to know the plants and when you can use them. Because, like, for example, with that chamomile, if you have a client that has sleep issues, but also has allergies and also has like a lot of gut irritation, I mean, chamomiles are brilliant and it's cheap and it's easy to use, but it ticks a lot of boxes. You're ticking off more than one thing in a go. So definitely get to know the herbs and when you would use them for the people. So like I say, just keep it simple, pick 10 plants and get to know them well and get good at using herbs for your patients, rather than just sort of thinking, oh, that one there or that one there will do. Really just get a bit more information on those herbs and
And the best example of that has got to be when you and I talk about echinacea. So for endometriosis, this is a big spoiler for everybody because it's so useful. We were talking about echinacea as obviously some liver support, immune support. But what I hadn't appreciated is that there's actually a specific function the literature suggests for endometriosis where it tends to inhibit, I think it tends to inhibit angiogenesis. And you and I were looking into the research on that. So I think that's a really valuable thing, is like, don't kind of dip into things without knowing too much, like get to know a certain amount. And on that note, if somebody misses it, I just want to point out that below this recording, we have a completely free download all about using Vitex in your practice. So thanks so much for sharing that information with us, because it's definitely one that I see people, especially on social media, and my clients have been advised to take in the past, and I can tell immediately that the way that they've been using it, or the duration they've been using it, or just it's not really a great idea for them, full stop. So everybody who's watching, make sure that you download Sarah's guide. It's completely free. Sarah, thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.